The Sith loved murder nearly as much as they loved power and letting themselves get dunked on by the Jedi. Most Sith casual fans are aware of their preference to commit their murders with dark side force powers and their iconic crimson-bladed lightsabers. But what if we were to tell you that the Sith used to have a far more diverse arsenal of weapons at their disposal? What if we were to tell you that the ancient Sith rarely used lightsabers at all, instead preferring swords forged from the blood of innocents, deadly frisbees, alchemically bred monsters, and semi-living warships that could tear the hearts out of stars? In this video, we're going to talk about all of these exceptionally metal ancient Sith weapons, plus many more.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
As you likely already know, the original Sith were a red-skinned species native to Korriban, though most lived on their adopted homeworld of Ziost. They were conquered in 6900 BBY by those they called the Gen Jedi, 12 Dark Jedi exiled from the Republic for crimes against civilization. The Gen Jedi infiltrated and seized control of Sith society, declaring themselves the very first Sith Lords. These Sith Lords reshaped Sith civilization into the first Sith Empire, which reigned in the dark reaches of the Outer Rim from 6900 to 5000 BBY, when it was destroyed by the Republic following the Great Hyperspace War. After the fall of the Sith Empire, the Sith Purebloods were all but wiped out, and the Sith Order underwent many drastic changes. The weapons we'll be talking about today were all from the era of this first Sith Empire. Before we dive into the weapons though, we quickly need to discuss the Sith caste system, as Sith of some castes were essentially weapons in their own right. The lowest tier of the Sith hierarchy was occupied by the Grotu, or slaves, beings from a variety of species that were often worked to death or used as living shields in a battle. Above them were the Massassi, or warriors, Sith purebloods who had been alchemically altered to have tremendous strength, agility, and ferocity. They were the ones who used most of the weapons we'll be talking about today. Above the Massassi were the Zuguruk, or engineers who designed everything from temples to warships. Above them were the Kisai, the priest caste, who were strong in the dark side of the Force and pioneered the alchemical techniques used to create many Sith weapons. All were subservient to the Sith Lords. Individual Sith, from rank and file Massassi to the Sith Lords themselves, primarily relied on bladed weapons. Handheld blaster and slug thrower technology was virtually non-existent within the Sith Empire, with only Sith warbots and other droid models using such weapons. Additionally, while lightsaber technology existed in the Sith Empire, lightsabers were uncommon even among the Sith Lords, as Sith swords were lightsaber resistant and could be imbued with all manner of unusual powers through dark side alchemy. The most common Sith weapons were run-of-the-mill single-bladed stabbing swords. These weapons appeared simple, but were anything but. Kisai priests used alchemical techniques to enhance them, submerging them in troughs of blood spilled in anger and sharpening their edges with rare minerals. These rituals allowed Sith swords to parry lightsaber blades and plasma bolts, and also made them far sharper than any blade could naturally be. Sometimes, these swords were granted special powers, allowing them to deliver icy stings or third-degree burns upon contact with exposed skin. Many were laced with poisons. Similar techniques were used in the crafting of more unique Sith swords, as well as vibro swords and double-bladed weapons. Sith royalty and highly skilled warriors used double-bladed Sith war swords in combat, while Sith assassins used short blades called shikar. These cunning daggers featured glassy blades that could be snapped off and shattered with a twist of the hilt, allowing the shards to fester beneath the skin of the victim. Most Sith Lords had their own unique swords, which were imbued with fearsome powers. Among these were the Sword of Ajunta Pal, a double-bladed sword with strange powers of shadow, Ludo Kresh's Warsword, which could channel the raw power of the dark side, and Naga Sadow's Poison Blade, which was soaked in some of the deadliest toxins known to the Sith. The Sith used bladed weapons for ranged combat as well. The Larang was a curved throwing dagger that would return to the thrower's hand if it missed its target, and was a common medium-range weapon among the Sith. For long-range combat, however, the Sith, especially the Massassi, preferred the Lanvarok. Lanvarok were razor-sharp discs, deadly frisbees the Massassi hurled from the ends of long staffs or with wrist-mounted launchers which could conjure up deadly sprays of the discs. In the words of Darth Sidious, the Lanvarok was a weapon of indiscriminate terror, but it was highly effective nonetheless. In battle, the Sith Empire's vast armies of Massassi were supported by fearsome Warbeasts, most of them bred through alchemical techniques. Many of the Sith's favourite Warbeasts were created by members of a Kisai order called the Ninush Wadzakut, a name that roughly translates to Knotters of Entrails. After the formation of the Sith Empire, these Kisai shared their knowledge with Sorzus Sin, one of the new Sith Lords who had used similar techniques to breed terrifying leviathans during the 100-Year Darkness. Together, they bred vile creatures that later generations would call Sith spawn. A few Sith Warbeasts evolved naturally on Korriban, with the most notable being the Tukata and the Hiss. The Tukata, or Sith Hounds, were vicious hellhounds with extremely long lifespans and plenty of tactical cunning. They were employed as royal companions by some Sith Lords, but most simply guarded Korriban's many tombs. Hiss, meanwhile, were lizard-like creatures that fed on rage and death. Natural darkside powers rendered them invisible until they wished to attack. Many Warbeasts were Sith spawn, however. The most common were Warbirds, Warbehemoths, and Warrims. Warbirds were vicious avian creatures that the Massassi used as mounts in cavalry charges. Warbehemoths were much larger creatures that resembled beaked, spiny elephants, typically used as beasts of burden, troop carriers, or weapons platforms. If you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, they were basically Mumakil. Warrims, meanwhile, were massive snakes employed by the Sith as siege weapons. These deadly creatures could grow to immense sizes and were used to tear down enemy fortifications. Some of the rarer Warbeasts included the Battle Hydra, a two-headed flying reptile the Sith sometimes used for air support. Massive sea-luth beetles naturally featured near impregnable carapaces and could unleash sprays of highly corrosive acid. They were used as tanks by the Sith. But the most fearsome of all Sith Warbeasts was the Terrentatek, colossal creatures that fed exclusively on the blood of Force sensitives. The Sith initially used them to hunt down renegades, but in later years they became notorious for preying on Jedi. As a space-faring civilization, the Sith Empire made use of many kinds of starfighters, shuttlecraft, and warships, most of which were fairly unremarkable. There were two Sith vessels that we feel are worth discussing, however, the Derriphan-class battleship and the Sith Meditation Sphere. The Derriphan-class battleship was the backbone of the Sith fleet. These warships were among the largest fielded by the Sith, though at 215 meters in length, they were quite small relative to some contemporary Republic vessels. These battleships were rather sluggish and completely lacked shield generators, but they compensated for this with extremely dense armor. Their crews were composed of 25 Massassi and a commanding officer, and they could carry a total of 850 passengers. Derriphan-class battleships were armed with 6 auto-blaster batteries, which were Sith equivalents to Republic turbo lasers, as well as 3 concussion missile batteries. Each carried 6 starfighters, 2 shuttles, and an assortment of heavily armored drop pods, which were the Sith's primary troop deployment vehicles. Drop pods were large craft that would detach from the undersides of their battleships during invasions, crashing into the surface of planets. Once deployed, huge bay doors in the pods would open and hordes of Massassi and Warbeasts would pour out. Compared to later warships, Derriphan-class battleships weren't anything special, but they were quite formidable for ships of their time. One of these battleships could fend off up to 6 equivalent Republic warships at once thanks to the Derriphan-class's heavy armor. Additionally, some of these battleships, such as Naga Sadow's flagship, the Corsair, featured built-in crystalline superweapons with tremendous power. These weapon systems amplified the power of arcane Sith rituals, allowing the commanding officers of augmented battleships to tear out the hearts of stars, inciting supernova. During the Great Sith War, The super weapon aboard the Corsair was used by Sith witch Alima Keto to destroy the 10 stars of the Kron cluster, causing a massive cataclysm that wiped out a Republic fleet and ravaged the Jedi homeworld of Ossus. But the ancient Sith had super weapons even more powerful than the ones aboard their battleships. During large-scale invasions, Sith Lords would withdraw to strange craft called meditation spheres, which they would fly to remote systems far from the front lines. These odd-looking vessels were partly alive due to the dark side techniques used to create them, and they served 3 purposes. In times of need, meditation spheres were capable of autonomously training Sith apprentices. In times of war, they acted as remote command suites from which Sith Lords could monitor the progress of their armies on a galactic scale. Their most important purpose, however, was to amplify the force powers of their masters. Skilled Sith sorcerers could use the Force to create massive illusionary armies. This would allow Sith armies and fleets to appear many times larger than they actually were. Sith meditation spheres amplified this power, allowing Sith Lords to cast such illusions over several battles at once. The strength of the illusions was also amplified. Powerful Sith Lords could use meditation spheres to create illusions capable of doing actual physical damage. The Dark Lord Naga Sadow used a meditation sphere to do exactly that during the Great Hyperspace War, creating an illusion army large enough to conquer Coruscant. The tide of the war only turned against the Sith when his meditation was interrupted, causing the illusions to vanish. The ancient Sith had a great many strange weapons, and we reckon we've covered nearly all of them today. But what do you think? Would you like to see more videos about the ancient Sith in the future? Let us know all that and more as usual in the comment section below. And once again guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.